Hello, all. Welcome to our weekly Clear Mountain Wednesday evening Q&A or discussion session. Today, we have one of our conversations, Ajahn, Kovilo, and myself. Um, Ironically, as part of the Clear Mountain project, neither of us is actually in Seattle at the moment. Ajahn is in Ukiah, as usual, at university. Ajahn, it's good to see you.
You as
I'm
well.
at the Pacific Hermitage sewing a robe and fasting. So that is why you recognize the background from the live streams of old. It's just like old times. So, Ajahn, it's great to have you and see you. Do you want to introduce the topic?
Sure. Yeah, it's good to see you. It's good to see people tuning in. Our topic for this evening's conversation is Buddhist self-esteem question mark. Why the question mark? Well, people can often be confused. I mean, doesn't Buddhism teach, isn't one of the major characteristics, the characteristic of not self? So what would it mean to have a Buddhist self-esteem? Is there any place in the Buddhist teachings for for a sense of inner well-being and is there a place for a provisional self-esteem, feeling good about your provisional self, and what might that look like, and what are the advantages of that? What might be the drawbacks of that? How can one, if there is such a thing as a Buddhist self-confidence, how can what does it look like, and how do we nurture it? I thought possibly an interesting framework to look at this might be one which I encountered through Ajahn Brahm's teachings. He has this teaching about kind of a transition or a movement from low self-esteem to high self-esteem and then to no self-esteem. Yeah, or not self-esteem. So, and to make that rhyme, because it'll be easy to remember, low self-esteem, mo self-esteem, and no self-esteem. So mo in the sense of more. So low,
Got
more.
it.
Yeah, good, good. And that's kind of fascinating. And I think that really, that makes sense to me. This, looking at self-esteem as a tool which one can implement, and it's actually really perhaps essential on the path. So that's just a brief introduction to the topic. Have you been thinking about this topic at all, Nisabho?
Yeah, really like the fact that you suggested it. Um, I One thing that came to mind, well, two things really. The first was the there's an interesting sutta I was thinking about that sort of surfaced with this topic around. Um, I believe the Buddha is talking about how one should um, basically. I think it's called the Inquire. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya, and it's about how one should sort of survey and evaluate a teacher.
Hmm.
And after seeing if, mixed states, bright states, and dark states are present in them, one also sees if they are restrained through fear or restrained without fear. Uh,
Hmm.
and the way you see that is if they're restrained by fear, they disparage others. And I thought and then it sort of speaks to that pretty consistent admonition in the suttas around um, the Buddha will recommend or encourage a bright quality and then speak about how one should not disparage others and laud oneself on account of that bright quality.
Hmm.
And um, just also about the nature of conceit being more than, less than, or equal to. And one thing that did strike me was that self esteem couched in terms of comparison to others. Um, and these qualities of, say, self-restraint characterized by disparaging others, it's a polarized dynamic which is dependent on a constant comparison with those in the external world, and that seems like a very different sort of self-esteem than the deeper sense of value, um, which either I would say comes from a comparison of one's current self to one's previous states and the acknowledgement of one's potential, but also seems to have a deeper resonance in terms of how I felt it in my own life, and it s- mm, something around the more deeply you step into that stream of Dhamma, the more your actions feel guided by and ennobled by that. And so the less you have to depend on that kind of crystallized formation of self that's, couched in views and comparisons. There's that one sutta where the Buddha says, actually, I think in a few, he says, one gets a sense of the goal, gets a sense of the Dhamma, gains joy connected with the Dhamma. And there's something about, or when one's mind heads straight based on the recollection of the Tathagata, of the Buddha, one gains faith, one gains a sense of the goal, confidence. So something with like when we begin to move in that direction, there's this real confidence, joy, and momentum that build. And I know Longpa Panyavado says that a good measure of our movement on the path is a genuine sense of self-worth, not in a worldly sense, but in the sense that we intuit that the world is something deeply, we have a deeply useful role in the world. And, so many qualities seem predicated on this, including Hiri Ottappa, conscience and concern, which I've heard, Longpa Pasna recently translate as based on respect for oneself and respect for others. Um, So, yeah, there's certainly something there, either in terms of distinguishing self-esteem as a worldly self-esteem, comparing oneself to others versus one, comparing oneself to a previous iteration and acknowledging potential, and also perhaps a deeper resonance with something, much, much more integrated and powerful in one. What are your
Mm.
thoughts, Ajahn?
Yeah, it's great having these discussions. Yeah, because you just pick a topic, and people who try to think deeply about Dhamma, or just immerse themselves in the sutras, will not necessarily pick out the same sutras or the same tact on the same subject. So, yeah, picking out that Vimamsaka Sutta, the Inquirer, yeah, and how the Buddha was said to be, or a good teacher is someone who is not biased because of fear. So, yeah, you're highlighting fear as being a fundamental push for low self-esteem. People being feeling not good about themselves, or making themselves huge in this comparatively
Yeah.
negative sense, based on fear. And then, yeah, also that comparison. If you I guess that the comparing mind, those 9 types of conceit, the 9 types of mana, where you think, so just as a bit more going into that for people who are not yet familiar with this, the word conceit, or mana, in Pali is not just thinking you're better than someone, but it has 9 different connotations. Either you're actually worse than someone at a particular thing, and you think you're worse, or you think you're equal, or you think you're better, or you're equal and you think you're worse, or you think you're equal, or you think you're better, or you're actually better and you think you're worse, or you think you're equal, or you think you're better. And all of those are problematic. But on the low self-esteem side of things, I guess we can think of like an outer self-esteem, or like a worldly self-esteem, being that just the self-esteem of conceit, like comparing yourself to other people. Whereas one doesn't have to do that, as you point out. There's a really great sutta which is in line with that teaching, where someone finds inspiration in the meaning, inspiration in the Dhamma. It occurs in lots of different places, but I won't say my favorite, but the most interesting instance of that is actually in the Subha Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya number 99. And that actually points to the Buddha positing a working sense of self. So I can actually read some of that. So this is the Subha Sutta. So the Buddha says, there are 5 things which are prerequisites of the mind for developing a mind free of enmity and ill will. Here someone speaks the truth in thinking, I'm truthful. So this is a working sense of self, working idea of self. I am truthful, and the Buddha is recommending this. One thinks, I'm truthful, and they find inspiration in the meaning, inspiration in the teaching. So that's inspiration in the Atta, inspiration in the Dhamma. And I say that joy connected with the skillful is a prerequisite of the mind developing a mind free from enmity and ill will. So based on that sense of self, you develop joy, and then you develop happiness, and not just truthful, but you have someone who practices austerities. Like right now, Nisabho is fasting, or anybody else who's done some things which are difficult to do. And the Buddha has this self-referential acknowledgement. I'm an ascetic, or I'm doing something which is difficult. And then one gains gladness based on that. And based on that gladness, one gets inspiration, the meaning, inspiration, the Dhamma. Similarly, if one's celibate, or if one does a lot of study, or finally, if one's generous. If one's generous, one thinks, I'm generous. And based on that generosity, they gain inspiration, the meaning, inspiration, the Dhamma, and joy based on that. So this is kind of the general arc of our plot line, going from low self-esteem to mo self-esteem, where we're finding like skillful means, like intelligent means of gaining self-esteem versus like the competitive and rivalrous types of self-esteem, which you highlighted. Have you looked at that sutta before?
Yeah, that's one of my favorites because of a different line in it where it's that Brahmin confronting the Buddha, right? And saying, the Brahmins do all these things. And the Buddha says, the worldly life is full of great undertakings, great tasks. And when it succeeds is of great benefit. And when it fails is of little benefit. The holy life is of little undertakings, little tasks. And when it succeeds is of great benefit. And when it fails is of little benefit. Of these two, I say, the holy life is greater. That's not supposed to be a conceited thing to say, but just to say that we monks sometimes do very small things a lot. Like I'm sewing a robe, but it was a pointing rather to the fact, and I think this could apply to any life imbued with, a sense of practice and purpose, to the fact that intention's paramount. But anyways, I hadn't picked out those pieces of it at all, Ajahn.
Yeah, what do you think about that though? Of this, like having this sense of self, the Buddha here is suggesting that if you have, genuinely noble, or if there exist if you manifest noble qualities on a regular basis, like actually taking those as a means to develop a sense of joy, an inner well-being, and delighting, and that if you can say, yeah, I'm a good person, or I don't hurt people, or I don't,
it strikes
say
me
mean things. Yeah.
It strikes me how in the Parinibbana Sutta, the Buddha says that a benefit of morality is one approaches any assembly with confidence and dies confused. You're right, because it's like that sense of deep, a really robust sense of self in a good sense. And yet it is interesting to look at also like how, there's a different sutta where he talks about how one tries to speak in terms of states rather than individuals. Like instead of saying one tied up with sensual desire suffers, you say instead a state of sensual desire is a state beset with suffering, which speaks more to the no self after the mo self thing, perhaps.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because you're right. We do kind of develop both in tandem at some level as well.
Yeah, and it is kind of, I mean, in one sense, you could say it's like elementary Dhamma. It's like a little kid, kind of giving myself a pat on the back for, doing these little things. But, so what? I mean, we are where we are, and yeah, I mean, get your wholesome sense of well-being wherever you can, and as long as you don't, as you mentioned, yeah, elevate yourself and start disparaging others based on this, and you don't take it too seriously. I mean, these the thoughts, yeah, I'm an ascetic, I'm celibate, I'm a truth speaker, I'm generous. You know, as long as you don't focus on the I in
Mm.
those kind of little thoughts, then it can, yeah, it can lead to brightness of mind. And really, you know, I think most yeah, psychologists will point to the usefulness of this is like having a sense of inner worth and a sense of that, yeah, um, you're a good person, you know, in some respect, is a very useful thing for psychological well-being. Um, but it would be interesting, I mean, kind of shifting, as you mentioned, to this from most self-esteem to no self-esteem. Um, have you found in yourself, or how do you conceive of that shift? Is it like one point in time where, like, you know, before you ordained, it's all most self-esteem, and then after you ordain, it's no self-esteem, or how does it
What,
look for you?
what about you first, Ajahn? How about you?
Um, it really is both. I mean, yeah, the, for it's so common, and I'll speak for myself. Yeah, the kind of self-bashing, you know, just it's so easy. You look at, okay, ask yourself, if you can even take the time to ask yourself how you've spent your day, you know, so much of the time, you know, what you remember are the tiny little things that you did wrong. Whereas if, you know, if I take the time to actually think, oh, you know, what are three things I'm grateful for? What are three things that I actually did that were kind of good today? You know, that can shift this, you know, what are three things I did today? You know, it is a meing in a sense. Um, but, you know, I'm not, you know, taking it too seriously. And it is just kind of a silly thing. And when one comes back in meditation, or even just moments of, you know, recollecting the present moment, that's where the no self esteem can come in, because the mind can be bright, and the mind can be open any moment, you know, when there's mindfulness present. And then especially within that moment, if you're paying attention to the quality of, there's just nothing self-like, you know, in my experience right now, then yeah, that can be, yeah, a nice bridge between these two things. So yeah, if one can, you know, think in terms of self-esteem from a position of no self, that's yeah, liberative, and it actually feels good. You can feel it when you're operating from no self-esteem, when your esteem is in the principle of yeah, anatta, not self, then it's just so much more grounded, you know, because with the self, we just have to keep piling things up and keep constructing it over and over and over. Whereas with not self, there's nothing you don't have to protect anything. It's just here in the present moment. So,
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. And for me, it also kind of, you know, Longpa Sumedho calls it the present intuitive awareness, that can kind of, there's a sense of sort of intuiting a pure path through situations, or a path that's, you know, not tainted as much by craving. Um, and I remember that, of the first three fetters at stream entry, that drop at stream entry, there's, you know, attachment to rites and rituals, self-view, and then skeptical doubt about the teaching. And I know Longpo Suchito really says, look, we tend to fixate on the one of Sakaya Ditti that drops, that is taking this being as a self, you know, or these aggregates, body, feeling, perception, etc. But he says the fetter that drops of skeptical doubt in the Dhamma and in the teaching and in the path is it's really important to hold up as well, because until we step into that stream and
Mm,
gain faith in it, we have no choice but to cling to something, and that happens to be the khandhas and the self. The only way that you get to step away from that constricted and agitated sense of self-identity, and a sense of self-esteem, which I'd say, yes, it can get, we can brighten it to an extent, but because it's always polarized, against others, and very dependent on conditions, it's not reliable. Um, and so my sense really has been that the as one lets go. I just remember when I decided to ordain, and it was a weird decision to many people in my life, and sort of agitated a lot of relationships, but suddenly I felt very swept along by something much deeper, and a lot of disparate parts of myself suddenly became integrated, and it's like the only stream bed in the world that ever was big enough to hold my heart all the way. And I feel like if we don't have a stream bed like that in terms of purpose, it means that our heart has almost no choice but to fracture itself into all these different little streams, of diversion or distraction, etc. Um, so all to say that the sense of there really is a sense for me as you move on this path of coming. Um, there's a brightening, and it's like the hand lets go of something, and what it fills with is light or something to some extent. Um, that's so I'm not sure. And those metaphors are everywhere in the sutta around, some suttas around when someone gets taught the Dhamma, it's not that they're learning something as much as, well, it is that as well, but so often they say it's as if the Buddha had uncovered something that had been covered, or turned upright something that had been turned upside down. And those all speak to a sense of recognition, something that has sort of been there, or that we recognize deeply in us. And for me, just the path is at that quality of sort of, it's not like you're piecing together yourself from a new pile of Legos. It's more like you're uncovering a sort of deeper intuition or path, that is there and has been there. Not to say anything about it being transcendent or the path itself, etc. It's also fabricated, but certainly it aligns better with my values and purpose than anything I'd ever found. That's me
mm,
rambling, trying to explain what I'm feeling for a while. Ajahn, what are your thoughts?
mm. Well, I appreciate you highlighting the fact that the stream enter is fully established in faith, and or the fact that their doubt has been thoroughly abandoned, and doubt is really kind of the enemy of confidence. You know, um,
Mm,
the doubt which one dispels when one attains stream entry is not necessarily doubt about oneself. It's more doubt that there is, doubt about the path, and but just the freedom from doubt, which can come when you do have this, broader and not so, our sense of self is just so tiny. I mean, looked at from any perspective, other than our own, just so tiny. You look at it on a temporal perspective over time, we're just a little blip. We're not even a little blip. You look at it from like a spatial perspective, whether tiny or large, we're just so small. But to have this, the riverbed, like you're talking about, like a bedrock of the Dhamma. I mean, that's something which you can really put confidence in. But we do need. I don't think you were using Legos in this way, but we come to the path often, still with a lot of childish ways of mind. And yeah, the mind, we've been, playing with this idea of self and kind of fixated on this self for so many lives and for so long that it makes sense. I mean, to jump from low self-esteem to no self-esteem is, I've never seen it work, actually. Obviously, I haven't yet seen everyone all over all the time, but you do see people who come to the monastery and who don't see these intermediate steps of brightening the mind, to get to mo self-esteem, to heighten their self-esteem based on wholesome things. They just try to jump straight into deep meditation on not self or impermanence or, dukkha, which is, and people who are not psychologically healthy, who don't have, an inner confidence, man, you just jump in the deep end, without any joy in your life, and you drown, or I mean, this isn't kind of mixing metaphors, but you dry up. I mean, people who've got no joy in the heart, no kind of water of the heart, as they say in Thai, nam jai, it's, you dry up. And so, yeah, use what scaffoldings we can to, to see these deeper truths and to settle into the bedrock. You want to have, if you can't, feel good about your meditations, you won't want to meditate. So, yeah. What do you think about this perception, Tanisbo? I am a meditator. I know did you ever read that book by James Clear, Atomic Habits?
I think I skinned it after you recommended it.
Yeah. One thing he recommends in there, which is an interesting idea, is basically, rather than fixating on the specific task or the specific habit that you want to
Mm.
you want to,
I did read it,
get.
yes, actually, I remember. Yes, I did read it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Rather than focus on the habit you want to do or the habit you don't want to do, you actually focus on the identity. So rather than being like, I'm going to play guitar for 3 hours every day, you're like, I'm going to be a guitarist, or even better, I am a guitarist. And this is a bit dangerous in a Buddhist context, but it can also be a skillful means. I mean, it seems like that's what the Buddha is pointing to in that Subha Sutta. I'm an ascetic. Uh, you can obviously find the holes in that easily, because what am I doing that's especially ascetic right now? Or I'm a truth teller. If I say that to myself while I'm in meditation, like, what does that even mean? I'm not even talking to anybody. But yeah, what do you think about that? Using this principle of taking on an identity as a means to increase good habits, decrease bad habits.
I know in the sutta where Ananda comes to the bhikkhuni and counsels her on her bed, he says that what does he say? Like conceit is to be given up, but it can be used on the path. When one thinks this venerable one has achieved the awakened state, why can't I as well? And the same with desire. So certainly, it seems like the Buddha and Venerable Ananda in that case explicitly pointed to the power of marshaling one's conceit or self for the sake of the path. And Ajahn Kovilo has just become a spinning circle. So, well, good. Yeah, so I would agree with that in general, and think that one can use the teachings as a means towards that. While we're waiting for Ajahn Kovilo to get back, let's take some questions. It's good to see everyone. Joseph Stevenson. I don't know Pali, but I've looked at a few suttas. Why are some Pali words so long? Let's save that one for Ajahn Kovilo, actually. He's a Pali scholar. I think he may be back. Ajahn, have you returned? Not quite yet. We'll save it for him. Is Dhammavichaya investigation important in gaining self-confidence? Thank you. Oh, now he's back. Good. Hello, Ajahn. Welcome. Can you hear us?
Okay, looks like Nisabho has temporarily disappeared.
Wait, I thought you disappeared.
Can maybe take some questions.
Can you hear me, Ajahn? Who can people hear? Can they hear Ajahn or Nisabho?
So we've got one comment here. Yeah, I don't know Pali, but I've looked at a few suttas. Why are some Pali words so long? A interesting point. So in the canonical Pali, words, you do have some long words, which are basically the Buddha can sometimes string to, or Pali and Sanskrit, you can sometimes string together lists of nouns. So rather than saying the dog and the cat and the bird and the elephant, you could just say dog, cat, bird, elephant, etc. And that would imply that they were, one after the other, and. So that's one reason. Also, you have different types of compounds, which show different case relations. So you might have the word cessation of suffering, dukkha nirodha, or the arising or the cause of suffering, dukkha samudaya. And yeah, that can be the cause of suffering. Yeah, apologies. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties.
Ajahn, can you hear me? Hello? Okay. I think they can hear me and you, Ajahn. I think you can't hear me, though, but I can hear you. All right. We'll see how this goes. I'm happy to let Ajahn keep answering questions. Ajahn?
So another comment. So it seems that recognition of our virtuous actions, which can lead to non-ego confidence and joy, also allows ease and freedom to not be defensive when unjustly blamed or accused. Yeah, it's true. When you have this sense of inner well-being, then and an accurate inner well-being, then yeah, you know what's true. If someone, this is a really nice Thai phrase, is that if someone calls you a dog, all you need to do is turn around and look and see if you have a tail. And if there's no tail, then you're not a dog, and you don't need to feel bad about things. So yes, very good point. Yombia,เป็นไงบ้าง? Good to see you. Have people tuning in from Thailand, old friends.
I think Ajahn Kovilo can't hear me, so I'm just going to let him answer these questions.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's me again. We're having a bit of technical difficulty. Do people see both of us right now or just see me? I think Ajahn Kovilo is disconnecting and reconnecting, and that he can't hear me. Okay, now he's back. Ajahn, can you hear me now?
I can. Yes.
Okay, could you hear me for the last 5 minutes?
No, I was answering questions as well.
I know. I was there as you were answering them, so it's good. The audience could hear us both, but I don't think you could hear me.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't see you or hear you, but we're back now.
Good.
Please continue.
Which question would you like to answer, Ajahn?
Well, we've got one popped up here. So question, will the mind drifts like the wind or thinks? Does that make sense to you?
No.
No,
Could you clarify, Bhavani? We'll
please.
try to answer if we know a little more. Um, how about this? And it seems that the recognition of our virtuous actions, which can lead to non-ego, confidence, and joy, also allows ease and freedom to not be defensive when unjustly blamed or accused. Yeah, I would agree with that. Ajahn, any thoughts?
Yeah, that's. Um, I was responding that that's like, yeah, when someone criticizes you, and if you have an accurate view of yourself, if you're not trying to prop up some sense of self which is just based on complete delusion, then yeah, you have something to measure yourself by when other people make comments about you. You can actually look inside and say, yeah, is this true or not? And if it's not true, then there's no reason to spin off on things. I think it's important to be more worried about not seeing your flaws than it is about hearing about your flaws. So, yeah, I think that's a really good point that was highlighted.
Here's a good one, Ajahn. Is Dhammavichaya investigation important in gaining self-confidence? Thank you. Should I take a whack at that? Okay, sorry. Let's see. So, for those who don't know, Dhammavichaya, investigation of Dhammas, is the second of the enlightenment factors. So, the enlightenment factors, there's 7, and they move from mindfulness to investigation of Dhammas to energy, virya, to piti, refreshment or rapture, depending on translation, to pasadi. Am I getting that right, or does it go straight to pasadi, samadhi? Pasadi is like tranquility of body, samadhi, concentration, and then upekkha, equanimity. And what's interesting for me here is I'd say that this is important in terms of gaining that deeper sense of um, self-confidence, or I kind of like, Ajahn, I kind of like your translation of saddha, faith, as confidence, because I've heard that translated that way, and for me, yeah, you can kind of just drop the self part and have someone with saddha, with a lot of faith. Um, it holds them, and there doesn't have to be as much self-referential quality, but it's almost like the agent moving towards a goal or target is stabilized, and empowered by that, a little like a bike moving. It's the faster and more direct it moves, the more stable it is. Um, so all that to say that, when we how do I put this? Investigation of qualities is, I think, what allows us to see the Dhamma in ourselves, in terms of how we are uh, conditioned beings. Um, so, there's a sense of being able to kind of slowly investigate and parse apart your neuroses and problematic mental, and personality programming. Um, and really, uh, for me, whenever that's happened, whenever I see, oh, I'm not, angry because I'm a bad person, or I'm just angry because I didn't eat breakfast, or didn't eat breakfast. And when I was a child, I had, this interaction with my parents, and I wanted to please them. And when I can't please them or keep the peace, it makes me anxious and angry and protective. So, all to say that when you sort of parse out your dukkha in terms of its conditions, which you do through investigation of dhammas, or you do the same for your good qualities in realizing that all these bright states are, in some sense, have been given to me. Look at this life I have. Look at these teachers I've had. Look at these friends I've had. What an opportunity to practice. And,
Mm,
you know, in the sense, both of, without that understanding of the conditioned nature of ourselves, that sense of agitated, self egoic and constricted sense of who we are is kind of our only fulcrum for identity and our only axis from which we interact with the world. And my experience is that's a very unstable place to act from. Not only do we sort of intuit that it's not stable, and so are constantly trying to reinforce it and telling ourselves, I mean, I think this is why when you have that angry moment you can't explain, your mind starts spinning out all these stories about it, like, oh, I'm always like this, because it's wanting to explain it somehow or
mm,
figure out why it's there. So it has to reinforce that identity again and again. But the more that Dhamma Vichaya, investigation of Dhammas, allows us to sort of open that identity into this sort of blossom of seeing how we're constantly taking in and conditioned by all these beautiful things around us, and even our bad parts, quote unquote, um, originate from really understandable causes, and the natural reaction to that is compassion.
mm,
For me, as this knots release, it's almost like the heart, in a wider sense, can hold all of that, and so that deeper sense of self-confidence, of groundedness in the Dhamma, of joy in the goal, and the Dhamma, of faith, of confidence, but not self-confidence, has a
mm,
chance to hold all that small stuff within it.
mm.
What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the self part of this, of self confidence, is just so slippery. Um, yeah. Well said. Maybe we can just, it looks like Bhavani has rephrased the question. Maybe we can just, this will be the last question, and then we'll switch over to Zoom. We've got our Zoom meeting. So this Bhavani's question is, can the mind go to a place or from place to place like the wind blows from place to place? Yes. I mean, you can experience that in your next thought. I mean, just think of a different country that you've ever seen, much less visited, some other place you visited, the neighboring town. You imagine it, and in a sense, the mind is there. The mind is not, restricted within this body. It's a very fascinating meditation to realize that consciousness is not inside the head, but head is inside consciousness. So you can feel, the back of your head, and you can feel, heat, around your body. And if consciousness were restricted to the body, well, this is a big point, but yeah, just on one level, you can see it, from one moment to the next, how the mind just flits like the wind, but even less controlled than the wind, because the wind is still governed by, rules of meteorology and things like this. But yeah, the mind can just jump continent to continent with nothing in between. So should we switch over to Zoom?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll paste the link.
All right.
So for those who are interested, we usually have a Zoom meeting now where we just all get to say hello to one another. And we're really grateful for all of our friends and the community joining us. And it's been a pleasure, Ajahn. Thank you.
Yeah, good seeing you.